Hello everybody, welcome back to the DDMM YouTube channel. First of all, Happy New Year. I hope you all had a very good holiday break wherever you're watching this video from. But unfortunately this isn't the kind of video that I imagined I'd be starting 2023 with. If you're watching the video, you've probably already heard the news that was announced this morning that Ken Block, the rally star, one of motorsport's brightest personalities, died in the last 24 hours in a snowmobile accident. And I just wanted to take a few moments to mainly recall on a story about Ken Block that's personal to me, and I feel it is the best way of me conveying what I'm feeling right now about a guy who I was a huge fan of and still am a huge fan of. Apologies, I am a little bit gummed up at the moment. I'm recovering from a bit of illness over the holiday period. I'm powering through, but that's why my voice is not sounding at full pelt and full volume as to how it normally does, but we'll bear with that. Ken Block. Before I go on to that story, just a bit of context for this story. My personal motorsport journey started in the mid-90s. Big Damon Hill fan, so Formula 1 was my introduction to motorsport, and then that blossomed and grew into touring cars and rallying and sports cars. Was Formula 1 still a very big part of that as well, and many other forms of motorsport. But I think it's fair to say that my fan journey, and particularly a spectator journey with motorsport, has been in an era or a series of eras where I've felt the thrills. I felt the thrills as much as any other fan, but it's majority been down to the machinery and what the cars have been able to do, as opposed to individual drivers. I contrast that because I know, say, those who were spectators and went to events in the 1980s and the 70s. You know, there was a far more human to human connection with what those drivers were doing on track, as opposed to now. That's not necessarily a bad thing. As I say, I still get such a thrill from watching live motorsport. I remember back to the first time I saw the Grand Depart of a Le Mans 24 Hours, for an example. One of the most exhilarating moments of my entire life. So it's not to say that it's a bad thing, as I say, it's just a little bit different per se to previous eras. Why this is important is, whilst the majority of my motorsport spectator thrill moments, as it were, have been machinery based, there are two in particular that, hand on heart, were purely down to the driver above anything else. One of them was a few years ago at Le Mans, watching Fernando Alonso go to work in the middle of the night in one of the Toyota LMP1s, chasing down one of his Toyota teammates. That's probably a story for another day, but that's one of them. Watching what he was doing in that particular set of machinery. The second one is Ken Block. So I'll take you back to 2010 to summarise the situation, or the event, shall we say. It's Wales Rally GB. It's my first Wales Rally GB that I've ever attended, and still relatively one of the first bits of live motorsport that I'd ever attended. First time on anything non-circuit based in the forests, in the wilderness, some might say, in Wales. And it was part of a group of four of us who went on this journey. Ben, who you've probably seen on the channel a few times, and two friends from university days, Mark and Dave. I remember us all loaded up in Dave's Volkswagen Polo. Even back then, that was a bit of a squeeze. and they're setting off for Wales to have a day of following what was day one of the rally in 2010. It was the Friday. We watched the first run through Sweet Lamb, always a good thing to do if you're a relative novice to watching rallying, a stage like that in the quarry and being able to see everything out in the open, great atmosphere and all of that. Really good. We then went to service, and then we went to another stage in the afternoon. And there's three things from that day that really stick out in the mind. One of them is the thrill, as I mentioned. I'm primarily a Formula One fan. Seeing Kimi Raikkonen drive in the flesh and seeing him in service, again, that's a story for another day. That was one of them. The second one's a bit of a weird one. It's, in short, a Group N Mitsubishi Evo spinning on a public road right in front of us and nearly having a head-to-head collision with them. We didn't. Everyone was fine, but that was quite an exhilarating moment that I'll never forget. And the third one is the one I'm going to go into a bit more detail with and explain why, for me, this encapsulates what Ken Block, as a person, as a driver, as a personality, was about. So here it goes. So picture the scene. It's the second stage that we've been seeing of the day. We've been out on the stages all day. This happens less so now because of the advances in technology, but to quantify, it's 2010, it's mid Wales, and I'm a second year undergraduate student from the north. I am not paying for a data contract at this point. In short, we have no idea who's leading the rally, who's out of the rally, apart from those cars that we saw at service, but a few stages have happened between that service and where we are at this point. So we've got a sort of an inkling, an idea of who's coming through, but we're not for sure of like, oh yes, well it's going to be Loeb, then Solberg, then etc, etc, etc. So you don't know who's coming around the corner next. And this particular corner that we're stood on is the exit of a left-hand hairpin, where there's a sequence of fairly quick S-bends behind and uphill to us. So the cars are almost coming down the hill towards where we're stood, and you hear them first. You don't see them, you hear them. And so the World Rally cars start coming through one by one. And as I say, well, you're not quite sure who's coming through. So it's also always a bit of a surprise to an extent who comes blasting around the corner, because it's a blind corner as well. We can't see the entry to it. We're just seeing the drivers get on the power out of the corner and stretch off down to our left for the rest of the stage. As I say, we couldn't see who was coming through, which brings me on to this one particular occasion where we're probably 7 or 8 cars into the stage. The really fast guys have already come through, as I say, your likes of Loeb. I think Hervenen was driving at the time as well. And we hear this next car coming through. And it's really important to convey the sense of hearing. We didn't see this car, we heard it. This car, just by the tone of how the throttle was being applied, how you could hear it fighting through the corners, left and right, left and right. This was unlike anything we'd heard up to this point in this particular rally. And before this particular car even got to the corner on which we were stood, to handbrake turn and power out the corner and past us, I knew it was Ken Block. I just knew from how the car was approaching us, having watched a lot of his videos and all his Gymkhana videos online leading into this, having seen him obviously get to service as well. We knew he was still running. we knew it was Ken Block even before we'd even seen it was Ken Block. And sure enough, tearing round this corner was this brightly coloured, mad liveried monster Ford Focus RS World Rally car. I'll be true with you, it wasn't the quickest line that we saw from any of those cars on that corner through that stage, but it's the one that sticks in my memory. I remember him coming around the corner with so much speed, as sideways as anything. I think he almost went off and were down a bit of a verge, a bit of a small ravine that was on the far side of the stage to us. Misses the apex by miles. But as I say, this is the one that stays in my memory from that day because it was so thrilling, so entertaining to watch. It didn't matter that there were drivers who'd gone through that corner a second faster, 2 seconds faster, whatever it may be. I'd gone to that event to be entertained and to see drivers on the ragged edge and feel that emotion that I'd heard so much about when going to see rallying. And Ken Block on that day was the driver who really got me in touch with that, and I just remember smiling. And that's why, whilst today's a very sad day, you know, I'm trying to keep those happy memories in my mind because, as I say, that's one of only 2 times in my life where I've seen a driver pass me by in a competitive situation, and their actions, their ability to keep a car under control and what they did with the machinery just made me go, wow. It was different to the Alonso example at Le Mans, but it's still something that brings me such joy when I think back to it. I never had the chance to meet Ken Block. Probably was that day that was the closest example when we were in the service park. We were a little bit too far away from him to meet him face to face, but I could see one of the great things from him that day was him, you know, interacting with those who gathered around his car for service. I then saw him compete again a few years later when he came over and raced in the World Rallycross Championship when WRX was really at one of its peaks at the last event at Linden Hill in 2017. Again, great interactions with the crowds whenever you saw him. And whilst the 2010 memory is the one that really sticks vividly in the mind, another example of it from that 2017 event, whenever Ken was on track, I couldn't help but smile. You know, some people talk about particular drivers, you know, always inspiring a set of emotions when they're on track, and I can honestly say Ken Block was one of those guys for me, in that every single time I saw him on circuit, he entertained, he put a smile on my face, and it didn't matter whether he was winning an event or not winning an event. That's not what he was about. He was there to entertain, and that's what I think is really special about him, and what will be hugely missed by so many people in not just the motorsport world but the automotive world as well. As he wasn't just a rally driver or a rallycross racer. You know, he was a businessman. He was a real creator in so many different ways that really transcended what he did on the rally stages and the racetracks around the world. As I say, I never got to meet Ken Block, but I know people who did, and I know people who worked with him closely, and I know from talking to them today that he was everything that you saw, whether it be on his videos whether it be when he was on Top Gear or in any aspect of his public life. He was a truly, truly awesome fella. Really kind, really funny, and yeah, will be dearly, dearly missed by us all. That's it. That's really what I wanted to say. My thoughts and prayers go out to Ken's family, Ken's friends, and anyone affected by today's news. Hold the memories dear, because whilst Ken isn't here anymore, the legacy that he laid down, the memories of what he did with his years on this earth, they'll never be gone, and they'll live with us all for the rest of our days. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.